Hi, my name is Henry Stoever. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors. Welcome to this episode of NACD BoardVision. Today, I'm joined by Mary Ann Cloyd, PwC's leader for the Center for Board Governance. Thanks for joining us today, Mary Ann.
Oh, Henry, it's great to be here. Thank you.
In this episode of NACD BoardVision, Mary Ann and I are going to be talking about asymmetric information risk, one of the key topic areas of NACD Directorship 2020. As we begin to discuss the topic of asymmetric information risk, I think it's important to realize that we're not talking about a new type of risk that boards and directors need to deal with, but rather it's simply a new phrase, a new term to discuss an existing challenge. So I'm wondering if you could take a few minutes to help us really define and understand and explain what is asymmetric information risk.
Yeah, of course, Henry, and I think that, again, as you said, year in, year out, I think our directors express that one of their top three concerns is their responsibility for risk oversight. And when you talk about asymmetric information, I think as many hours as I have spent in boardrooms, I will admit that the first time I heard it described that way was by Ken Daly with the NACD. And I think his description of asymmetric information is a great way of capturing the fact that management has and is the keeper of information. Boards need information to discharge that risk oversight duty, but there is not complete symmetry, or there's not symmetry, and I'm not even sure there should be symmetry between what management has and what the board has.
So last week we were in Chicago, where we brought together, upwards of 150 directors and governance experts, and yourself included in your team. So if you could summarize 6 hours into maybe 30 seconds, but summarize the key learnings and key takeaways that you gleaned from the afternoon.
You always give me such challenges, Henry. Thank you. The group very thoughtfully discussed the challenges. I think some real key takeaways for me. One, how do you make sure that there aren't any inappropriate filters between what management has and what's coming to the board? And when we talk about filters, I think there can be any number of concerns, and that's, do you have a situation where, worst case, you have a controlling CEO who might be deliberately trying to keep information from the board? I think that's extremes that hopefully we don't see too often, but that we have to admit could exist. I think one of the other challenges is, how do you get the right information? And there's a lot of discussion around, can there be too much information? But I do believe that there can definitely be too much information from a board perspective, because if all you're getting is just data, there can be information overload. And I think information overload can be a challenge from the standpoint of, the proverbial missing the forest for the trees, but making sure that you've got the right information and that it's understandable. Another real point beyond the filters and how you get that information goes back to something we talk a lot about, and that's tone and culture. Because I think the tone that is set at the top and the culture of the organization is very much another aspect of what information gets to the board and ensuring that board has the right information.
What you're really getting at is how to mitigate that risk a little bit, or a lot. What I'm wondering is if you can really touch on, Mary Ann, a little bit about the board leadership structure, but I'm wondering if we can peel the onion back a little bit more and talk about some ways that the board, beyond culture, or maybe if you want to dig more into culture, because I think that is very important, but kind of continue down this path of mitigating asymmetric information risk.
Yeah, so Henry, I think you have absolutely hit on one of the keys, and that's leadership. And I think it comes down to board leadership. And leadership, to me, is much broader than the concept of chair versus lead director, separation of chair and CEO, because I believe that you need leadership at the level of whether it be an independent chair, whether it be a lead director. I think you also need leadership at all of your committees, but I think you also need leadership from each and every individual that's on that board. And that leadership can be exhibited in terms of even managing the information. So if you are on a board and for some reason you don't feel like you're getting the information that you need, part of leadership is continuing to work with management until you do.
Right. Thanks, Mary Ann. You know, leadership and culture certainly are absolutely critical in every organization, regardless of your company type. And as we as we discuss this topic, it's really not a new topic. It's just a new term. And we really appreciate your time, both in Chicago. We're going to be in LA in a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to it.
And we're going to dig into this, into some others, and we're going to do some more research on it and really help boards understand and realize what they can do to help mitigate this, not necessarily new risk, but a new definition, and have a better understanding on how they can serve as stewards for the enterprise. On behalf of NACD, PwC, Mary Ann, and myself, thanks for joining us on this episode of NACD BoardVision.